How do you do? This is Trixie the Golden Witch, ranting, raving, to Queen and Mother of AnyTube, and you've made it to another episode of Vlogust, which is the month of vlogs that I'm doing 31 vlogs for 31 days in August, because I turned 31 years old in August. Wow, what a thing. And at the end of the month, I'm going to make a crazy announcement that's going to make you shit blood and die. So, you better watch it, because who wouldn't want to shit blood and die? Your grandma, that's who. Anyways, Bird's with me.
I shit blood, and I haven't even heard the announcement.
Oh no! Bird, you are my fiance.
I am. You are my fiance.
And you like hiking.
I do.
And you like cooking. And you like driving. And you like Game of Thrones.
The Game of Thrones is a new thing. All the other things I kind of liked all my life. I actually have only seen the first and 8th season of the original Game of Thrones show. I'm a lot more into all of the lore of it all. I've spent a lot of time listening to not House of the Dragon, that's the name of the show. Fire and Blood, the Targaryen historic book, as well as I listened to the audiobook of the first Game of Thrones book, and it is very good one-to-one comparison with the season.
So, House of the Dragon is the new show that's just coming out on HBO Max. The show, House of the Dragon is the new show that's coming out on HBO Max, the app that is apparently deleting just about everything else that exists on it. But this show had the biggest HBO debut of all time or something, because, you know, Game of Thrones is a huge IP. It's also competing with that new Amazon Lord of the Rings show that we'll probably be talking about as well. But that one comes out September 2nd. And we're going to be following up our discussion of House of the Dragon by talking about it on the new Void Gazers podcast over on the ASE Presents channel. So, you know, we'll be doing episodic coverage. What did you think of this first episode?
To be completely honest, I'm not even caught up to House of the Dragon's events in Fire and Blood yet. I am only in the time of the Old King, Jaehaerys, who is in the very first scene of the show, and that's it. The show actually starts 100 years into the Targaryen dynasty, which overall takes place about 300 years. It is 170 years before the main Game of Thrones show, and basically what has happened before House of the Dragon itself is 100 years ago, this guy named Aegon came from Valyria, which is where the dragons and the Targaryens, and also the Valerians, who are another very important family in House of the Dragon, they all came to Westeros 100 years ago with Aegon and his 2 sisters, who were also his brides, all dragon riders. Aegon, Visenya, and I think Rhaenyra, it might be Rhaenys or something like that. They all came and basically bent all 7 kingdoms to their will. The only ones they couldn't, or didn't have to rather, were Dorne. They failed because Dorne just hid in the desert and they couldn't find anyone. And then the Starks, they didn't have to fight because the Starks just kind of came down and surrendered and said, hey, please, we like our cold up here. Don't bring dragonfire. Basically, the dragons are like nuclear weapons. No one can fight against them, and so in Game of Thrones, the original show, Harrenhal, it's a ruined castle, and it was ruined by Aegon during his conquest because the guy who lived in Harrenhal was basically like, you can't burn stone, and then the dragon came along and burned stone, made stone melt.
Damn.
But yeah, I mean, Aegon and his sisters went around conquering everyone, making everyone bow down to them, and then as long as they bent the knee, very similar to Daenerys, he wouldn't really kill them, although Daenerys does kind of kill a lot of people that bend the knee to her. But Aegon was known as a very relatively nice ruler. He didn't kill people for no reason, and he traveled around the 7 kingdoms constantly as the king to understand who he was ruling. Past that, there is a saying that comes up in Game of Thrones a lot. When a Targaryen is born, God flips a coin, and it's basically they're going to be really nice or really evil. I don't quite remember who takes the throne after Aegon, but eventually we get to this guy named Maegor, who is basically House of the Dragon's Mad King. He's the most recent, like, terrible Targaryen in memory. He was killed on the Iron Throne, which is used as He is killed on the Iron Throne. And something interesting in Game of Thrones is a lot of the time, if a king is not fit to rule, you will see him, or it will be brought up, cutting himself. And in the first episode of House of the Dragon, you see Viserys has like a sore on his back. He cuts himself once. Interestingly, Daemon, his brother, doesn't. But so Maegor died on the Iron Throne because everyone says he was such a cruel king and killed people for no reason, and everyone hated him. After that, a couple different infants are like crowned king, but eventually this guy named Jaehaerys is crowned at I think like 8 years old, and he is a really cool king. He's the guy we see in the first scene, and all of his kids, heirs, basically just die.
You mean the guy we see as an old man? As
an old man, yes. So he's crowned as like 8 years old, and he rules as a peacetime ruler for 60. No, he is 69 when he dies, so he rules for 61 years.
69 when he dies?
Yeah, nice. So then we see the Great Council in the start of the episode, and it is Jaehaerys choosing between his grandson, I think, and grandniece, Viserys or Rhaenys. And yeah, that's the start of the show.
Where we cut in, and you pretty much immediately know you're down for Game of Thrones politics. The guy is the two options for who it could be. One of them is like, yeah, I'm excited. Well, the one who takes the throne actually is not really excited to take the throne.
No,
the one who really
Viserys
wanted the throne is excited to kill that guy and take the throne anyways, it seems like.
I don't think he is trying to kill him.
I was thinking the lady, his...
Rhaenys.
Yeah.
I don't even think she's trying to kill him, to be honest. I think they're just trying to get sea power. And she's also a dragon rider, so they can have a fleet and a dragon, and pretty much as long as no one else cares in the Targaryen family, they can just go away. A big point of Rhaenys' husband, his name's Corlys, or the Sea Snake. He's also Valerion, one of the other families that came from Valyria. And when they got married, he came back from the far reaches, a place called Ashai or Yiti. It's not sure which one. Yiti is basically China in the Game of Thrones universe. Ashai is just spooky. It's where Melisandre is from in Game of Thrones.
Okay.
So he comes back to marry Rhaenys, and it's quoted as saying basically, I came from the ends of the earth to marry you. And Rhaenys said, and we can go back to the ends of the earth, but because I'll be on a dragon, I'll get there first. That's cute. It's fun. But so... Jaehaerys has to pick between either Viserys or Rhaenys, and Rhaenys is actually Jaehaerys' firstborn son's daughter, so she's real mad that she doesn't get picked. But then we skip to 9 years after that, 9 years into Viserys' rule, and he doesn't really seem to like it that much. He just seems really bored. I mean, he
mostly just wants to have a successor. Like, he's really desperate to have a male heir be born, so that if he just can literally fuck off and die, at least he'll have a son that's ready to take control. And right now, he only has a daughter, and his daughter's like of age, reasonably competent.
I mean, she's like cupbearer and everything. He's having her around to learn how to do things. Yeah. He just doesn't expect her to be his heir.
She literally is in the High Council or whatever. Is that what they're called?
She attends the High Council because she's the cupbearer.
She gets to be in the room where all the important decisions are being made. So
the room where it happens.
Yeah, as it were. So she's always in the room where it happens. She knows what is going on and why in the town, and has a competent level of understanding about it. But
she
nonetheless,
looks very similar to Daenerys, which is fun.
Yeah. She has an interesting face, that lady. She stands out immediately when you see her.
Yeah.
Also, obviously, all the blonde hair. I mean, from a marketing standpoint, this show...
it's going to sell a lot of bleach.
I'll be happy with platinum blonde coming back as a major hairstyle because I'm a big fan.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
It's just really funny how straightforward it is that, in the original show... the blonde girl was the most popular. So they were like, what if we had a whole show where it's all blonde girl?
Well, they've got to have a really successful spin-off to do all the ones that they assume will be less successful, like the King's Landing one and Snow.
Snow will be, you know, Jon Snow's pretty face was the other big selling point of Game of Thrones, so I'm sure that'll do fine too. But yeah, like the blondness of this show, it's almost blinding, but it did to me give it more of like an immediate high fantasy edge feeling.
They're like elves. And in the episode they do take a lot of time. The Targaryens take a lot of time talking to each other to go, hey, we're more like gods than we are men. We're cool. We have dragons. Yeah. And actually, Viserys is kind of coming at it from the other end of like, we shouldn't have had dragons. We all suck.
You've talked about how like in the Game of Thrones books, there are just like way more dragons than there are in the Game of Thrones show, right? No, in the Game of Thrones books, it's just Daenerys' 3 dragons. Oh, okay. It's just, they're described as being a lot more distinct from each other. So I don't remember exactly which one is which, but I think Drogon's like black and he breathes black and red fire, very similar to Aegon the Conqueror's dragon, Balerion. One of the other dragons is bronze, and then one of the other ones is green, and they have fires that color as well, which didn't really translate to the show. However, in Fire and Blood, it's the age of dragons. It's when the Targaryens had all the dragons. The thing we are reaching with House of the Dragon is what's called the Dance of the Dragons. And if you want to know what that is, please look it up. I don't want to spoil the show for you. But we're going to see a lot of cool dragon fighting. That's what I can tell you. We've already seen, I think, only 2 dragons in House of the Dragon, and that is, I want to say Syrax, which is Rhaenyra's dragon, and then I don't know that they said Daemon, Matt Smith's character's dragon's name, but the fun part about Matt Smith's dragon is Matt Smith. The fun part about Doctor Who's dragon. Just call him Matt Smith. You might as well. He's his face is that face, you know.
Matt Smith's dragon is named Syraxes, and the fun thing they're doing with this show, House of the Dragon, they're going to have 28 different dragons with 28 different personalities. That's a quote from someone working on the show. It reads
like a back-of-the-box quote on a video game, like a JRPG.
Yeah, pick your dragon. Which personality do you want? The first season, I've read, we're only going to see 9 of them. So, but the fun part about Syraxes, or Matt Smith's dragon, is that it, much like his character, is kind of deformed and fucked up and mean. Though we don't see a lot of Matt Smith actually being mean, just a lot of enforcing laws brutally and making funny jokes. I thought it was a lot of fun. Aside from Tyrion, I haven't really seen a character in Game of Thrones who's just like having a lot of fun with it.
Right, aside from that guy.
Yeah. And Daemon, he's great. At one point they say, Viserys says of Daemon, we already have a Visenya, because Visenya, Aegon's sister wife, carried Dark Sister before Daemon's character.
Dark Sister?
Dark Sister is the sword that Matt Smith carries around.
Okay.
It's a Valyrian steel sword. The twin to it is Blackfire, and then something that I either missed in Fire and Blood or just wasn't really talked about that much. Viserys has Aegon's dagger, which supposedly has a prophecy that predicts a Song of Ice and Fire. And it's passed down from ruler to heir to ruler to heir.
The phrase "a Song of Ice and Fire" is very explicitly
said
in this episode and in like the preview for the season in like another context. I think it's George R.R. Martin like really making sure people remember that like
the books aren't done yet.
The books are not called Game of Thrones, like. But this is still the same universe. Also, that Dagon, you said was his name.
Daemon.
My favorite thing about him is that he is a marketing genius.
Right.
Like he's introduced. That was the second one he has. He starts off with this. He like has the police just like run through the town and just basically beat the shit out of anybody who's out at night, like and committing any kind of crimes. But he has them specifically swap out their previously white like capes for gold, and so they're like storming through the city in gold just to make everybody notice that they're in gold.
He says it explicitly. They will learn to fear the color gold.
Right, exactly, and it works. It makes him like. really popular with his basically he's turning the police into like
his police.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's got the loyalty of his men because he always just like takes them out to the titty bars and like gives them lots of booze and gives them slogans and makes fun of the royalty and says things like "I air for a day" and all that kind of shit, which is in reference to the fact that the king in this episode, his wife is pregnant with child. He thinks he's going to have a son. He's so determined to have this son, and then
throws a whole tournament about it, which is bloodier than any tournament we've seen in Game of Thrones. Well, no, it's even bloodier than when the Mountain freaked out, because 4 or 5 people just get killed for no reason. Yeah, there's a point where a bunch of people get pissed off and just start killing each other, and they're like, it's because they're really green. Like these people haven't seen combat, so they're just really trying to get it out. But yeah, so there's a whole jousting tournament going on that Daemon is a part of, and then at the same time, I just want to say real quick, Daemon's armor is all tricked out in dragons and stuff. Like he's got a cowl where it kind of convenes on the point of his nose to be like a dragon. His arms have dragons. His horse has dragon armor. It just looks really cool. One of my favorite parts of this show compared to the original Game of Thrones is the symmetry, the symbolism. They're all more brightly colored. They're more present. You see a Baratheon carrying around a shield with a stag on it and stuff like that. They're all tricked out in dragons or stags, or for the Arryns, hawks. We only see one Stark, and he looks very lackluster, like you would expect a Stark to.
Well, he works for the Wall too.
Oh, was that what he was there for?
I think so. He was wearing the black cape thing that all the guys on the Wall wear. So.
Huh. Well, it's cold up there, so they're all wearing fur all the time.
Yeah.
I missed that. I will have to go back and check that.
He looked like a Watcher on the Wall to me anyway. I could be wrong about that. But there was one Stark briefly cameoed in.
Rickon. He was a Rickon.
But yeah, so this whole tournament's going on, and meanwhile the queen is having the baby, but they're she's probably not going to make it.
And at one point during the birth, the Septon says to King Viserys, sometimes a father has to make an impossible decision, whether to lose the wife or
lose only the wife, or to lose the wife and the child, because if she tries to give a natural birth, they might both die, but if they give her a C-section, they might be able to save the child. C-sections being in medieval times not a really
pretty much always deadly
method of birth for the mother.
And in the behind the scenes at the end of the show, they even take the time to go, back then it was a 50-50 shot to give birth and live.
Right, at all. Yeah. So this was on
top of which, actually, the Targaryens have a tradition of marrying their brothers and sisters, as Aegon the Conqueror married both of his. So there's the incest factor too, going on top of, I don't know, either having twins or just having birth defects, stuff like that. But hey, keep the blood pure, Valyria.
There's a pretty merciless depiction of a C-section in this episode.
It was really well intercut with the tournament going on, everyone dying in the tourney. It was fun, and again, in the behind the scenes,
fun is a word for it.
Well, it was
for watching.
It was a really good.
That woman's belly get cut open and blood erupt all over the place. Also, the Fresh Prince air for a day lasted about 3 hours. So. If the wife could have possibly given a natural birth at all, it might have been the risk worth taking, because then they wouldn't both be dead. But who knows?
It's really sad. And then after that, they have the council meeting, and everyone on the High Council is like, "Hey, King Viserys, who's your heir? Who's going to be your heir?" Yeah. And basically Viserys just keeps going, it's not going to be Daemon. It's not going to be Daemon.
Daemon's the obvious answer, but the council, particularly the right-hand man,
Otto Hightower.
That guy really hates him. That guy's got a sleazy beard and comes off he's untrustworthy.
When we were watching it, I said he seemed like a mix between Tywin Lannister and Ned Stark. He seems like the bad guy of the show more than Daemon does.
Well, his daughter also gives off massive psycho vibes. She's going to turn out, because she watches her brother get his ass kicked by Daemon and then gives Daemon a blessing about it all happily.
That is true. She does do that.
And then she's it's also
once Emma, the queen, dies, Otto sends her to the king's chambers to comfort him, and it's the whole like, you want me to go to his chambers?
Right.
Yeah. And then we get this really cool scene where Viserys is he's carving King's Landing out of some kind of stone, and it's just so cool.
Yeah, I forgot he's a big time. It's kind of implied that like what he's done as king is like hide out in this room and carve the
King's
castle.
Landing.
Yeah. In the end, he ends up allowing his daughter to actually be the successor just because he wants to keep Daemon from being it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Otto is like being oddly sexual with his daughter. I think there's something going on there. But towards the end of the episode, his own.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that.
He was really kind of creeping on her towards the end of the episode.
Huh. Interesting.
He also is, sending her around doing sexual things and stuff. So I don't know.
In Fire and Blood, it is mentioned that in the end of Jaehaerys' life, she was like his chambermaid. She bathed him and helped him live and stuff, and she was even younger then for a 69-year-old man.
Incredible. That's probably why she's like the way she
prepared to do this. Why Otto can trust her to just like, hey, go comfort the king.
Right.
Nudge, nudge.
That's some fucking dark shit.
It is. I really like this show.
It reminds me of Fate. Fate Stay Night a little bit. The show is gorgeous to look at. It's like early Game of Thrones. Well, Game of Thrones like really hit like a peak in like seasons 4 or 5 area of like looking really incredible when they had built out all the sets and like all of them were just so fucking detailed and rich. And here they've clearly got new sets, repurposed stuff, but they've also implemented a lot more like green screen and CGI, I think, than early Game of Thrones did.
The show's a lot brighter too.
Yes, it's bright lit. It's very golden and orange and like. Whereas Game of Thrones had like King's Landing stuff was always like kind of gold orange, but everything in like a lot of the shows
outside of King's Landing was just very dark and scary. And
yeah, exactly.
I think part of the implication is this is a time of peace in not in Game of Thrones, but in Westeros rather.
I'm really glad that the show looked as good as it does early on because I'm not gonna lie. I almost wanted to meme on it when right after the like succession scene at the start of the show. The very first thing is like the daughter, filling everyone's cups inside the council room, and they're literally talking about like trade routes and like being pissy about trade routes. And I kept thinking,
the prequels,
like the Star Wars prequels. And I was
you mean the best Star Wars movies?
I sure do like all this set dressing. Are they really like mumbling? Well, it's just the tone of the scene because it's a very like. This is rote. That's the word I'm looking for. Like it's a very like, we're arguing about trade routes again, yes, type of scene. Like
actually bringing up the High Council. One of the weirdest parts of this for me, and it's not even actually all that weird, is just whenever they're in the High Council room, they have like a little bowl plate thing and a little ball, and they put the ball on the plate to go like, I'm here. And sure, I can understand what the function of it is, but what the hell are they? Like, where did they come from? Why haven't we seen them till now? Maybe they represent dragon eggs. That's what Riley thinks.
Whoa, maybe we'll find out. Or maybe we won't. Or maybe you will in the book.
That is true. I would like to catch up because I'm starting to get to the point where like Corlys, the sea snake, Rhaenys' wife, the master of ships, the man with the seahorse on his chest. He's just been born, and it's just like alluding to all the stuff he's going to do, and it's like, wow, he's going to be an interesting character. He has a name like the Sea Snake. What could that mean? What did he do?
I don't know anything about the Sea Snake.
Me neither.
I will be finding out with you. I'm thinking about the whole tournament scene. How at the end, so they build up Daemon throughout the tournament. He's a badass. He's not like ruthlessly murdering people the way that some of the other people are. But he makes it to the final match, and
it's with, I think his name's Cordis or something like that. He's a lowborn guy. He is just doing really good in the championship. He's a great fighter. It shows him kicking a Baratheon's ass at one point. A Baratheon which takes the time to ask Rhaenys' favor, calling her the queen that never was.
Right. Which, I like the way that scene was presented, because he means it to her as a compliment and like a sign of loyalty.
Because she is half Baratheon.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so she's half Targaryen, half Baratheon.
And like other people take it as like a sign of like a warning of like, oh, we should be worried about this. But
Otto leans into Viserys' ear and says, you know, you could have his tongue for that. And he goes, yeah, but it's not going to stop people saying it.
She takes it more as like an insult. Like you could tell that she's like, oh, great. Like, well, you know, I don't feel good about not being
the queen.
Thanks, you know. Thanks for the reminder, guy. But yeah, that whole scene, the whole part, like, there's a lot of it because it's intercut with the birthing scene, and like there's lots of people around discussing what's going on. It's just like one of those events that pulls all the major characters that have been established so far into it. So like
Daemon's first jousting match, he gets hit the first time, and then because he gets hit, he gets so pissed off that he uses his lance to like trip the other horse. Yeah, it's crazy. And all of us watching it are just like, you can't do that. That's not, you're not supposed to do that. But then they congratulate him for it. So
Daemon, in the last match, gets knocked off his horse and dragged across the side rail thing. They go to the ground. They're having like a full-on brawl, and it gets to that like this was like the most Game of Thrones scene so far.
I think it was specifically meant to invoke the mountain jousting. Yeah,
I'm going to mention that for sure because there's another scene a little earlier where a guy is like he's like arguing. And then it cuts to his head cut off, like in a basket full of body parts. Like
so that's when the Gold Cloaks are running throughout the city, killing the people that aren't following laws.
So that is a shot that is used several times in the old show, and that like really brought me back right away to like visual reference. They're doing the Game of Thrones like cut to head on a pike gag, you know. And
you mean Ned on a pike?
Ned also on a pike too, but in the tournament, yeah, like they're really starting to get that like that cinematography that feels like the old show, and the fight choreography and everything, and it gets really tense because on the one hand, it feels like Daemon would like murder this guy. On the other hand, this guy is completely unestablished, so it seems like he should win. Like obviously, the Matt Smith character like would be the one you expect to die to fuck with you in a Game of Thrones sense.
But neither of them die because he's just a really good fighter. And when he wins, I don't really know if either of them win, but they get told to stop. He takes his helmet off and. I believe Rhaenys, the princess, goes, oh, he's Dornish.
Original show, there was a Dornish character who's like up bragging, gets dragged down, and gets his fucking eyes pushed out. In this show, Matt Smith's character is standing, bragging, gets grabbed by the Dornish guy, dragged down, but ultimately spared. And so it's like a direct reversal on the other scene, playing with my expectations of the way that scene had been edited and written, and then subverting it. It was clever. It kept me on my toes. I was, because there had already been some really violent deaths, so you're kind of expecting there to be like a over the top crazy death that's going to end the episode. When actually you get the C-section.
Yeah, it's the C-section. It's a couple like axe to the face deaths. It's nothing too crazy. It's still not very fun to watch. I know I said it was fun earlier.
There's a really great shot where after a guy gets axed in the face, it just like cuts to like a drone shot of right above his just like fucked out face.
Right,
like
it does.
That was a great shot.
I watched the first Mission Impossible recently, and in the very beginning, a guy like gets crushed by an elevator, but his face gets stabbed, and it was very reminiscent of that. It seemed like a very similar special effect.
Grotesque.
Yes, not bad. Gross.
Also, the music in this show, phenomenal.
There's a couple times they like almost play the original, then they just avoid it.
That melody comes up a lot throughout, especially in the beginning, but it it tapers into different places. Like
Yeah.
it'll go into like a different key and then change into some other melody. But like I mean, the music in the old show was obviously hype all the time, but this was like new and exciting again on the music front. And I was like, I could actually see just like listening to this soundtrack independently, which is not something I can say for lots of shows personally. Overall, I thought this was a solid episode. I wouldn't say that it got me like crazy hype or anything. There was nothing that was like, wow, this is going to be better or different than Game of Thrones. It felt more like, it's Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it feels a lot like Game of Thrones. It feels a lot more like the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones, but, just touched up and nicer. I didn't see a Starbucks cup, so that's very good. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, in the books, the Targaryens, or just Valyrians in general, they have the blonde hair, but they also have purple eyes. And in the show, none of them have purple eyes. They have blue eyes usually, but Rhaenyra, the princess, is wearing purple earrings a lot, and so I thought that was a fun little parallel to it, to still acknowledge that purple is one of their colors. I really like this show. It's great. It's very fun to have all the lore behind it, and to learn about it going forward. When the show was first announced, I watched a lot of a YouTube channel called Alt-Shift-X, and he had talked about a completely different Targaryen civil war, and so I thought it was going to be that. But it's the cooler one.
Is there anywhere that we can find you besides here on the internet, Bird?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at BirdStorc, BirdStorc.
And you can find me on patreon.com/goldenwitchfire to get a rant about anything you want for $5 a month. I do a live stream where I answer every single rant request. You just DM me whatever you want me to rant about, and I'll take care of it. Also, goldenwitch.substack.com is where I post my written articles. I just posted a new one called Everybody Wants to Be a Mark. I'll link that down in the description, along with stuff like my hip-hop group Sucker Punch. We release a new track every single week. We've got tons and tons of stuff linked down there. Spotify, YouTube, wherever you need to go. I'm also on other podcasts. There's playlists. You can find me. You know what's going on. Every week when this show comes out on the new Void Gazers podcast over on the ASE Presents channel, we and our friends are going to continue discussing it, just sharing any thoughts we have as it continues. So be sure to subscribe over there if you want to see more of our thoughts on this show. Thanks again for watching, and never
remember,
forget,
dragons forever.
Dragons forever. Da 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 da.